It's funny because, oh good, I should be back on for him. Hopefully. Uh, yeah, no, it's pretty awesome. I love 40K, and it's so hard to like get a team together that gets like the atmosphere of 40K,
Yeah.
because
Yep.
it's one of those games that like if it's off, it feels really off.
Hmm.
So let's see here. I should have the stream up and running. I don't have the chat open because it distracts me as a GM, so I try to avoid that. But I know, Lloyd, you said you're in there. Are they seeing
I am
stuff now?
indeed. Let's find out. I think somebody said they saw something, but we'll see.
Okay.
Okay, they're saying it's not back.
Okay. They may have to refresh their screens, and it should come up shortly. Oh, you know what? Refreshing their screen won't do anything.
Okay.
It's easier if they just go to my homepage, and then they'll see a new live cast going. That will be the same title, except for it will say redo on it.
Okay. Oh, Rob says it works.
Okay, good. Then that means it corrected
Yep.
itself. Good.
It's back. Cool.
So we have figured out that in the grimdark future, people can hear you scream. So that's good.
We didn't apply the sacred oils before we started. That's what it was.
All right, cool. So we're just going to pick up where we left off. I'm not going to go into like a big redo of everything. Watch the 2-minute video that was before this. If you're catching this on the stream afterward, it will be in the playlist and make a lot more sense. So for Heritage, Jeff, you said that you were interested in which skill? Or action?
Survey.
Survey? Okay,
Survey.
cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that because you were in a city studying people and stuff like that, I do want to make the difference between study and survey, because those two are really close. Study is more about interpersonal connections, and survey is more about like survival and surveying a city. So if that changes your mind.
Yeah, I think survey is definitely closer. Like, you know,
Okay, cool.
standing, you know, being able to pick up on city on like being able to track somebody down and pick up clues, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
so I think
definitely
survey
good
is
for,
the
like,
way.
passively receiving information from the city. So that's good. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page, because those two are like I said, real close. How about for your divination? Is there anything that screams? I forget what yours was. What was it again?
It is do not ask why you serve, only ask how.
Okay, cool. So after this stream is over, I'm actually going to go back, rewatch that part, write down your divinations, and I'm going to try to test those as we play, which is kind of a thing that I picked up from Burning Wheel, because this is basically what your belief is in the world. So any of those kind of fit the idea of what you have in mind, how your character would interpret his divination? Or her, for that matter, since we haven't gotten that far.
It's like, that really comes down to like doing what whoever the person who's in charge of me tells me to do. At least that's the way that I would see it. So it's like, what skill really fit? I guess it would depend on who's telling me what to do. If we wanted to like tie directly into like the assassin thing, then you could maybe make an argument for like skulk, I guess.
I think skulk is good.
But
what might be a good way to think about it is like, when did you have your divination pulled? Like, did you have it pulled when you joined the Inquisitorial Order because your family didn't have enough money to pull it beforehand? If that's the case, skulk makes a lot of sense, because you've taken it on. You're like, no, I'm the Inquisitor's shady left hand that people aren't supposed to pay attention to.
yeah, I think that makes sense. Like once you joined, you got this divination. It's like, yeah, I'm the guy who does all the work that they can't do publicly, but somebody still needs to do. And I'm not going to ask the questions. I'm just going to do what they tell me, and that's what they tell me.
Okay, cool. All right, Lloyd, how about yourself for your background first? We'll start there, heritage rather.
Yeah. So I thought study,
Okay.
which to me is kind of like insight, sort of. If we're translating it to 5e, like reading people, understanding people.
Yeah, it's like a mix of like research and insight all in one.
Yeah. And I just like yeah, I feel like that's. I'm trying to think of like a shrine world and what that would add to me. I feel like it's got to be something interpersonal as opposed to something like physical, because I feel like the life there was probably quite safe for a 40k
I do
sort
want
of
to make a
setting.
note, if you have 2 dots in anything, you cannot go any higher than that at this point.
Yeah, my 2 dots are in warp, which I think is like a tune in
Yes,
your.
it is their version of a tune.
Yeah. But it could easily be consort or command or sway as well. Like I think anything that's sort of speech related. I say study because I already have a dot in it, and I also feel like it's something that a psyker would be good at, like reading, sort of like a telepathy or like an empath sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think study's a good place. I will argue for consort. Consort might be good because of being on a shrine world. You're used to visitors. You learned how to like pull information from talking and smoozing your way through a crowd. So that might be a good option too.
Yeah, the only thing with that is that I feel like lots of people don't want to schmooze with a psyker.
Yes.
Like there's a real stigma, you know. So I feel like lots of people will be like, ugh. So I feel like most of the conversations that I have are like, "You will tell me," you know, as opposed to, "Hey, how are you?" You know,
They're bullet point conversations.
yeah.
In that case,
so maybe
command might be a better option for you.
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okay. What about for your divination?
So my divination is a suspicious mind is a healthy mind, which is the best one, my favorite one.
I think study's really good for that one. Just right.
Yeah, I think that one fits really well for that.
Okay, cool. And Jerome, what about for your heritage? Do you have anything that jumps out as being highborn soldier?
Yeah, for being highborn, definitely.
You're coming across real light again.
Definitely go with command for highborn.
Yeah.
Simple. I give orders. I'm used to being obeyed. That's just the way it works.
Okay. And what about your divination? Is there something that stands out for that one?
Men must die so that man endures. I'm going to go with skirmish because sometimes people just gotta die for other people to live.
Okay. And the guardsman. Oh wow, the guardsman's actually a really neat spread. I did not realize that. You actually start with 1 dot in drive, skirmish, and wreck instead of 2 dots in one thing, and 1 dot in another, like most of the playbooks operate. So that's actually pretty interesting how they set that up. It kind of makes you the skill monkey, which is pretty funny. Okay, cool. So the next thing is to put 2 dots in that are basically your personal interest for your character, what distinguishes you from just another highborn guardsman or hive world assassin or whatever you are. So Jeff, what 2 do you want to invest in with your points?
I think I'm gonna go for 1 more in Skulk. This is like he's like really specialized in that specific part of it. Like I imagine like he was already good at that when he was kind of growing up in the city, and then becoming part of this has only kind of heightened that even further.
Okay, cool.
For the other one, I'm definitely thinking probably I think Sway. I think he's had to be he's put himself where he's had to learn how to talk himself out of those situations and could kind of like convince people what he's doing is on the up and up, and like that he's like not as bad as he actually is, kind of thing.
Okay, yeah. All right, Lloyd, how about your
I
2?
think those are.
I thought wreck, because the scale of psychic powers in the 40k setting, like it's not really in my control. If things get intense, like we could all explode, you know. So I feel like there's major consequences to actually unleashing that power. So I thought wreck was good for that. I have 2 in warp. I have 2 in study, and I thought maybe one of the other speech skills, so either consort or sway.
I love how you're not doubling down and taking Tinker and being like, screw it, I'm just gonna give myself to the warp 2 games in.
What does Tinker like represent?
Tinker
is it like
crafting?
Okay, yeah.
So, in the case of the Imperial Psyker, it doesn't look like you can tinker with, like, you don't have any special abilities that are for tinkering.
Okay.
However, you could turn around and take something off like the Tech Priest, like Machine Speaker, which, when you tinker with something, the GM will tell you one useful fact about it, its creator or whoever last used it. That's like one of the abilities off of the other chart. Because you guys will have veteran abilities that you could take pretty much immediately after your character is done being made. And you can take it from a different book of your choosing.
That's nice. I do like the idea of consort, but like that it's a manipulation, sort of like a psychic manipulation. Like, okay. I appear as a friend or something like that, and then it's like a sort of... because it can't always be ripping secrets from your mind. Sometimes it has to be a conversation, I think, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and we can definitely flavor that however you guys want. So, like, your character rolling a consort, we could say that you're doing some subtle warp manipulation. But like big warp manipulation is going to be a warp instead of like a sway in that case. Like, I could see you doing things like altering your appearance to the person you're talking to, but like if you want to alter your appearance to a crowd, that's going to be a warp instead.
Sure. Yep. Or even just giving like the idea or the suggestion that they might know me or something like that. You know, works for sure. Jeff, how do you feel about being there to ensure that if I get out of control, you put the bullet in my brain? Because that's like a real role in the Imperium, because the Psyker is like so dangerous and so powerful that they need someone basically on them all the time in case things get out of control. And you're an assassin, so I feel like that would be interesting.
Yeah, no, I like that.
The chat.
Yeah, no, I like that idea of it's like, yeah, I'm here to put bullets in the brains of whoever needs to have one there. That may include our resident Psyker.
Is Ezekiah aware that Jeff's character has the bullet with his name on it?
That's a good question.
Because you may not be aware of which of your partners it is, but you know one of them is it.
And I think he would probably guess at the officer, since that's like that's a job the officer does in the army, which is like shooting people who try to run away. But yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
Okay, cool. And Jerome, for your 2 free points, what'd you have in mind?
Consort, the velvet glove over the iron fist.
Okay.
Easily explained. Part of the whole being nobility, schmoozing, learning how to talk whenever it's necessary.
Okay, cool.
And the other would be hunt, for my training in the guard.
Okay, yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. So excellent. So we've got that done. I'm just grabbing a sheet of paper so that I can do some stuff later on. The next bit is we get to choose a special ability. So there are some things inside here that work a little bit differently, and I'd want to point those out. One of them is special armor. Most classes come with a special armor ability, which in the case of the Imperial Psyker, let's see, which one is that one? Warp Control is the special armor one. It'll say it inside its description. How special armor works is you can use it to resist a certain type of consequence that's coming your way, basically damage or harm, or you can push yourself to get a special feature that is specific to your playbook, really. So like the Psyker can push themselves when dealing with supernatural forces. So if, let's say, a tear in reality opens up to the warp and the Imperial Psyker goes, oh no, I'm not letting that shit happen. He rolls warp, pushes himself, and uses warp control. He could actually close the warp tear before it gets out of control, that sort of thing. So go ahead and look over your sheets and let me know if anything jumps out at you. This is also a good time to kind of look at those acolyte special abilities that we talked about, because your special ability with your playbook might be better with a specific special ability from the crew book. For a good example is for Blades in the Dark, when you play traditionally like the normal game, if you use Bravos, it comes with a gang of fighters. So if you are a cutter, taking the ability that makes your fighters better is a really smart investment right at the beginning.
My options would be inquisitorial agents or friends in high places.
Okay, so let's talk it over. What's cool about inquisitorial agents that's kind of making that an option for you?
General +1 to action rating, to command, which I imagine we'll be using quite a bit. Hunt and skirmish, also always useful skills. It's very utilitarian, kind of neutral. Doesn't really have any drawbacks. So, but friends in high places, the -1 suspicion is looking very attractive. Mm-hmm. And also gathering information. We are agents of the Inquisition, so that's kind of like our job.
And for everybody playing the home game, we're actually talking about the Acolyte's crew sheet at the moment.
Yep. I mean, I'm always a fan of the inquisitorial agents equivalents that most of the crews get. The thing that just gets you an extra eye in one of the things. Like, it's just always very good. Like, it's not necessarily super exciting. Like, you don't get to be like, yes, this is the time we get to use our awesome crew ability. But it's just solid all the time. Like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, the first ability in every crew sheet is always the +1 to one of those skills for each person. That one's a really solid investment. It's hard to go wrong with that one, to be honest.
Yep, I mean, I would say the same. I think that's
okay.
It's just really good, and yeah.
And it's the most open choice, because there's nothing that really, like, on your character sheet that's going to be like, oh, since I have 3 dots in command, I really need this ability. There might be something that looks good, but it's not super necessary. You can take pretty much any special ability on your personal sheet you want and be fine. So with that in mind, it looks like we're going in inquisitorial agents, which is a +1 to command, hunt, or skirmish. Each person gets to make their choice, and their choice is per person. So, like, Jeff could have hunt, whereas Jerome could have command. So with that in mind, how do you guys want to spend that? We'll start with Jeff.
Definitely hunt. That'll put me dots in hunt. I think it fits like exactly what the character's trying to do. The other ones are very much like command stuff, which I think he's going to be more of the work. The dog in this scenario. So just somebody tells him who to shoot, and he's really damn good at it.
Okay. And Lloyd?
I'm not sure. I don't have hunt or skirmish. I feel like skirmish might be a useful one if we get into a fight and I don't want to explode the city block. So I think I'll go with skirmish.
So to give you an idea, you will not, unless you use a special ability, you cannot use warp to do combat.
Yeah.
Like, that's a thing about the system. Magic is there and it does stuff, but it does like the big scale stuff. It doesn't do like magic missile. Like that's not really a thing that it's built for. There is a way to do that. It's called rituals. I don't know if Blades of the Inquisition has rituals or not, because that's super dangerous territory as far as 40k is concerned.
Yeah.
Because then I have to add, if it's not already in there, if we did rituals, I'd be like, so what demon are you pacting with? Like, that's the kind of thing that
already there's a bullet somewhere in my brain where there should be.
All right, so Jerome, which one are you going to invest in?
I'll take skirmish.
Okay, cool. So now that we have that in mind, let's look at our individual playbooks as well. So jumping to the assassin, which one are you looking at, Jeff, that you think sounds pretty good?
So the one that jumps out immediately is Angel of Death. When you push yourself, choose either perform a feat of athletics that verges on superhuman, or maneuver to confuse your enemies so that they can attack each other. I think it gives like a lot of flexibility, a lot of things you can do. There's
Yeah, I
also
like that one a
always the
lot.
special. There's also always the special armor one, which for me is Shadow, which you can use special armor to resist a consequence from the detection or security, or push yourself for a feat of athletics or stealth. But it's definitely between those two, I think, for me. To start with.
I will say the one that I would lean towards is probably Angel of Death, just simply because
Yeah.
it's a little bit more active rather than like a waiting on an action happening for you to be able to engage with it.
Yeah, it's something you can like choose to do. Like I'm going to do something that lets me use this ability. Yeah, I think I'll go with that.
The idea that you have an ability to let you confuse your opponents and make them shoot each other. That's actually super awesome that they put that in there.
Yeah.
Okay, Lloyd, you got an idea on yours?
Yep, I'm going to go with telepathy. You can warp to do one of the following: influence a target's emotions, cause an enemy to forget about your presence, send or receive thoughts. I was kind of like thinking about telepathy initially as like an interrogator style person anyway, so that's definitely the one for me, I think.
Okay, cool. So I mentioned that you couldn't do warp to directly damage people. If you do have like pyromancy, which allows you to shroud your foes in searing flames, when you activate pyromancy, that's when you can do that thing. So basically, like if you took the pyromancy ability, then warp will be useful for combat. Taking telepathy, there isn't really a way with telepathy to harm someone.
No,
it's more about passive and learning.
Yeah, I think though that's probably going to be a more useful skill overall, and probably why
I think so too.
Probably why he was chosen for the Inquisition as opposed to for like the army.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jerome, what do you have in mind?
I'm kind of torn between group tactics and also commander.
Okay, so
Those
taking
are
a
my...
look real quick here. Group tactics: when you perform a group action, you count as you count multiple d6s from different rolls as a critical success. That's a really strong ability. It doesn't get used in Blades in the Dark all that often. I'm not entirely certain why people don't take that one. Basically, anytime you guys help each other out, you work as a group to do something. Let's say that Lloyd rolls a d6 and that Jerome rolls a d6. That's now a critical success instead of just a standard success, which is pretty useful because you have 3 pools of dice to pull from to make a critical success, basically. The other one you were looking at was which one?
Commander.
Commander. Okay. So the only thing about Commander is it does require you guys to invest in a gang. We haven't gotten that far, or sorry, a cohort. We haven't gotten that far inside creating your crew just yet. But to give you an idea, you only get 2 advances for your crew. To create a gang, that will use up all 2 advances.
Oh, okay.
So if you guys want to invest that way, you can, but that should kind of be a group decision. That way you don't pick an ability that won't be useful until like 3 games in when you guys finally get a cohort.
Okay. Then I'm cool with going with group tactics.
Yeah, I think it's going to pay off with immediate results rather than kind of long-term results.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So that is your special ability. The next thing that you're going to do is choose a friend or a friend and rival. If you look there on each of your sheets, it's going to say connections. Like for example, the guardsman. You have Volruda, an engineer, or sorry, an engineer. Cybele, a field surgeon. Basically, there's an up and a down arrow. If it's an up arrow, it's a positive contact or a friend. If it's a down arrow, that's a or enemy. And when you make this choice, what I do want you to do is think about what your actual relationship was with them. For example, I made a cutter for Blades in the Dark that had a doctor as his weird kind of dating relationship. but that played out inside the game. That's the main reason that I want you to kind of think about what that relationship is, so that I can play to those as the GM. So this is basically a choice of what sounds cool. These are people that we add details to as we go through. Literally, the extent of who these NPCs are is what's on your sheet, their names at the moment. So, and when these NPCs come up, because you may interact with them, I'm going to ask you questions to kind of start things and help me guide my RP for how that person should be. And then we'll kind of discover who they actually are once everything shakes out through play.
Okay, I've got mine.
Okay, cool.
Me too.
All right, Lloyd, what's your positive? We'll start there.
Tidera, a navigator. So navigator in 40k is like a tolerated mutant. Like they have a third eye that they use to like look into the warp so they can travel through space. They're also kind of psychic, and so myself and Tidera worked on an Imperial vessel together. Me as part of the Astropathic Choir and her as the navigator, and we had a couple conversations that went fairly politely, and we became friends throughout that process. We spent a few years in the same ship.
Is she bonded to the ship?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So for Jeff and my new 40k people, bonded to the ship is a very literal thing. At some point, navigators become actually physically part of the ship that they're navigating for. The way it's been described kind of varies, but usually it's like their lower half is missing and the ship is their lower half, and there's a bunch of cables that go into their back and chest and other things. And they pretty much become a brain that's attached to the ship itself. Which means that she's actually a high-ranking navigator, and she's at the point that she can no longer interact with regular humans because regular humans don't know about that fact about the navigators.
Yeah.
Being a psyker, you would have a better chance of knowing that. Having a close personal relationship means that you definitely know about that. Okay, so what about your negative relationship?
Berenet, a confessor. He works for the Order Hereticus, which is a separate branch of the Inquisition. And he is a purist. He would never allow a psyker to be anywhere near his retinue. I don't know if he's an inquisitor or if he's just a confessor, but he's somewhere in like the sort of radical purist end of what you would consider to be the Inquisition. And he just hates me for I'm a psyker and I have like done well and advanced, and he hates that. That's something so impure and so terrible and so disgusting could like do well in the Holy Inquisition.
Okay, cool. Jerome, you said you got your two. What's yours?
Yep. Chog, an Ogren veteran, successfully led Chog's unit into battle against Greenskins. So he respects me. Doesn't understand everything I say, but he gets the gist of it.
Okay. So that leads me to an interesting question. How did your character feel about being assigned to his unit?
For the most part, I've been a rebel against my family. My joining the guard was frowned upon, let's say. So doing things that are radical or outside of what would be considered acceptable, just to push my family's buttons, makes me happy.
So you embraced it.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool.
If it's dangerous, if it's dirty, I love it.
Okay, cool. And what's your negative?
Torque, a commissar.
Okay.
Torque came up through the ranks, earned his place, and he resents me coming in as an officer, thinks I'm soft, and sees me as being unworthy of command, and so we've never gotten along.
Okay, cool. And I'm sure he was very excited to see the Inquisition take you away at one point. Cool. So we can work with that. Jeff, what about you?
So I I don't know exactly how to tie it in quite as well because of the setting. But what I think would be interesting, given the playbook, is I'm going to go with Vibria, a zealot.
Okay. Sorry, my dog was like trying to get in our kennel and making a ton of noise there. All right, so the zealot. Okay. Typically in 40k, when they refer to a zealot, it is somebody who's actually worshiping the emperor as a god, which is by the law not okay, but most people get away with it because it's just really hard to influence it. He's a godlike being that people don't really understand because he's got such super science that it's beyond their comprehension. So he is that point where magic and science start to blur. So more than likely, this person, the zealot, has like a church or at least a following and is very preacherly about the beliefs that the emperor is a god. Alternatively, if they're an enemy, they could just be somebody who's a complete heretic. You've been hunting them for years and they always seem to escape you. They're your Moriarty.
Yeah, I think they're my positive ones. So I think, I think in like the divination of like, don't ask why you serve, only ask how. Maybe this person has like kind of twisted that into like making my character somewhat of a believer in this kind of emperor god cult. Of just like, yep, that's just part of the duty of what this means to be, is that I'm going to do that. Without hesitation.
Yeah, that's an interesting kind of angle to play at, is if your character is a believer. In Dark Heresy First Edition, I played an assassin from a feral world that worshipped the Emperor as the Star Lord, is what he referred to the Emperor as. And the Inquisition could not break him of it. Like, no matter what, as the campaign went on, he became more religious and devout because of like fighting demons and all that nonsense. So it's an interesting angle to play. The rest of the party should be like, no, don't worship the Emperor, especially the Sire.
I think that actually everyone worships the Emperor. Like, he's known as a god. He's dead. He's like kept alive on this throne, but he's worshipped in like so many different guises that lots of people, I think, don't understand they're worshipping the Emperor. But it's like necessary that you worship him, or else you are a heretic, because he is God. He's the only God, kind of thing.
It's a really weird dichotomy. Like,
yeah, it's confusing.
By the law, you're not supposed to, but then there's like other places where they're like, well, you should, but.
Right, and I'm from a planet that worships, like, every part of the planet is like a church to him, and like, so it's all over the place. Right, so I would say like a zealot is kind of like the confessor that I was talking about, somebody who's like so intensely like religious that it's like dangerous for people around them.
What about for your negative contact then?
Negative contact is going to be Naveen, a ruthless noble.
Okay, cool.
So maybe something that I've done has maybe I got one of their underlings or one of their important pawns that they used or something like that in the past, and put me on their wrong side.
So I will notice that Blades of the Inquisition, a lot of the connections are written as males. If we want to change that and make any of these NPCs females, you definitely can do that. It's part of the Blades in the Dark intent behind design that everything is very neutral as far as names are concerned. So it's an easy change. All we have to do is say Naveen's a female name if you wanted to do that, or something like that. It is not terribly uncommon that females have male names in the Imperium, actually. So it's a pretty easy fit as far as genre is concerned. All right, cool. So we've got that sorted out. The next bit is to choose your vice, which in this game is called corruption. Let's take a look, because I believe there's some special stuff. Yeah. Step 7. Instead of choosing a vice, choose a corruption. This is an aspect of your person that is unfit for Imperial society that could get you into trouble one day. So these are... They operate a lot like vices do. You can choose to not engage in them, but your character will have a very hard time if they don't engage in this sort of activity. So when you look at the list, like one of them is, let's see here, Forbidden knowledge. That's kind of the easy one that a lot of people go into as far as the setting's concerned. When you pick forbidden knowledge, you could say that you are interested in stuff like lost tech from before the Dark Ages, which means that you're kind of dabbling into kind of heretical stuff that could be useful if the Mars people approve it, but for the most part, it's scary and you shouldn't mess with that sort of thing. Our options are crime, decadence, dissent, forbidden knowledge, greed, heresy, mutation, and pleasure. If you pick mutation, I'm going to ask you what your mutation is and how does that need to be addressed. I just want to point that out. It could be something very small. It could be something very noticeable. If it's something noticeable, I also need to know why the Inquisition is allowing you to continue to live at this point.
Yeah.
Like a good mutation that an Inquisitor could have and still be part of the Inquisition is stuff like infrared vision. It's not immediately noticeable to other people. Maybe your eyes have a different like sheen or color to them, but it's enough that you could kind of hide it, still do your duty, and it's useful to the job. So does anybody have a corruption that they're just itching to tack onto their character? All right, Jerome.
Pleasure.
Pleasure. Okay.
Came from a highborn lifestyle. I am all about feeding that mortal shell, making sure that I get to live the high life as much as I possibly can.
So decadence and pleasure are both listed here, so I want to make sure that we are thinking along the same page here. When I think of pleasure, it's going to be things like you eat food not because it's decadent, because it's rich and it's beautiful and it's got this great texture or taste. You go out and you do things because of the feel and the emotion behind it, whereas decadence is more about the status behind it.
Right. It's definitely more about the sensation.
Okay.
You know, the finest amasek, the finest foods, being able to literally enjoy the finest things in life.
Okay, cool. Lloyd, do you have one in mind?
Yeah, I was really hoping to avoid being like a heretic, but I feel like forbidden knowledge or heresy are both like just so good for a psyker. I think particularly forbidden knowledge, like I think it starts from a good place.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, but you know, we can use the weapon of the enemy against them, and if we just use their magic, we could, you know, that kind of thing. I think makes a lot of sense.
What is your field of interest for forbidden knowledge then? Like, is there something that particularly kind of like gets you geared up and you're looking for that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think let's say it's Xenos' psyker ability. So when he served on the ship with Tidera, it was in a war against the Eldar, and he saw some of their psykers do things that were just amazing and like far outshone his own ability, and he always has been interested then in learning that kind of ability.
Okay, cool. So the reason I ask these questions is during play I can introduce things and say, oh, hey, look, there's a Tau who is showing some sort of psyker power, and that may distract you from the mission.
Yep.
It's up to you to whether you succumb to your corruption or not. If you do, it will have effects on you, but it's basically there as something that I can do to kind of challenge your character and what you believe in and that sort of thing. So Jeff,
sure.
What do you have in mind?
I'm kind of back in between a couple. I think either it is definitely one of them. I think that would make sense. There's me that wants to just, you know, because I love to torture myself and my characters, to take dissent against all like the divination and everything, to have it like literally be like the one thing that his destiny is not supposed to say. Just to have that one moment every once in a while to be like, screw the rules, screw what they told me to do, I'm doing. And then immediately like regretting it, like going back to the zealot and being like, I'm sorry. I've done bad, just to make it just hell for myself.
Okay. Yeah, they're all they're good options the way you're playing them. I think greed is probably your least interesting option. Greed's a very like easy to make the connection with the assassin kind of thing. I think the other ones might be a little bit more interesting to play.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Descent just to really see how the heck that's gonna play out.
Okay. So Descent is rooted in basically seeing a difference in the utopia of Warhammer 40k. So what is it that you fight against that the government has done? Like bureaucracy is kind of an easy one because there's tons and tons of it. In fact, it's pretty much the reason why the Empire is in the shambles that it is at this point. That's a pretty easy to identify type of thing that you could dissent against. It could be like the internal structure of how the Inquisition is done, or something like that. You could be mad at like registration of space vehicles because that's a whole different department and it's crazy. So there's a lot of that bureaucratic type stuff that you could be involved in, or it could be dissent against the church, which is like adjacent as far as bureaucracy is concerned.
Yeah. Imagine it's probably something with like some sort of like restriction, like maybe there's like, you know, their weapons are typically registered and he's just like, no, that's dumb, I want to be able to do my own thing, or like, or some like, no, you can't kill him yet, you need this to happen first. And he's just like, nah, screw it, I'm just gonna like
have the right to bear flechette weapons. No big deal. Okay, cool. I like that. A little Second Amendment action going on there.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
All right, so that is really kind of the last part as far as mechanics are concerned. You guys should record your names. Ezekiah was easy enough. If you have any things that you want to do as far as like an alias, if your character goes by a certain alias while on missions or things like that, you could put it inside there. And then look is mainly a category for you to put down any distinguishing looks or factors. Like, for example, the guardsman from his noble background may have like a golden tipped cane. For whatever reason, he just carries it around with him all the time. That sort of thing. It could be really anything you want. The good thing about look is if you say that you have a certain item, it's with you and I can't really take it away unless we make it a big deal kind of thing. So if you want your character to do the Jack Sparrow thing and always have a particular hat, like that would be part of your look. And I had a really cool Inquisitor name, but I put up the post so long ago. Let me see if I can find it here. Your Inquisitor is Gadriel Andromedes, or Andromedes, which I will put into Skype for everybody. So my Skype's going to look a little weird, which means the broadcast will look a little weird for a second. He is an Inquisitor of the First Order, of Hereticus, just to give you an idea of what his background is. And we decided that he is going to be a psyker, because that's a good fit for everything. And Andromedes to kind of start things off, has sent you over to a hive world to investigate the distribution of a new drug that he believes has some heretical consequences for the locals. Going over your dossier, he believes it to be a psycho agent that connects people to the warp. So in high enough doses, it can give mundane people access to the warp and warp powers, which could be highly dangerous for people on this hive world. The dense populations, this is basically a powder keg that's about to go off. I will take a 5-minute break here because it's about that time, and then we'll come back in and we'll start the game from there, because I think we have enough to kind of get the ball rolling. And we're going to start with kind of you guys coming in on a shuttle and docking, that sort of thing. So for everybody who's tuned in and watching on the broadcast, I'm going to switch over the screen so that these guys have some privacy during the break, but I will see you guys in chat because I pop up inside the chat during the break. So for everybody who's been watching, thanks, and we'll see you after that's all done.
Good. Expert is not your friend tonight. Good God.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. I don't think I've ever had it crash anywhere like this. Normally it's very stable.
How do you want us to give character names, by the way?
Say again?
How do you want us to give character names? Just tell you, write it down, send it in the chat.
Yeah, you can just tell me. I probably will not update our overlay until the second session, just because I don't want to open up Photoshop and use more CPU at the moment.
Yeah. I did thing I like never do, which is pull up a name generator, just because I have like no idea for this setting. I think I
Warhammer
found one
40K
that I like.
name generators are usually pretty spot on.
Yeah, they have a vaguely sort of Latin feel.
Yeah.
Jeff, can you talk for a second?
Yes. Hello.
Okay.
getting
Jerome, it looks
feedback.
like you're getting feedback. I just wanted to see where it was coming from. Oh, fun part. I can't actually see the chat when you guys put things in it.
Oh.
Actually, I can now because I rearranged it to where it'll work. So this is my favorite part, the fact that I'm gonna have to go back and edit out me trying to fix all this stuff. I love it too because chat's like, oh, so this is what your break looks like, because they can see everything that I'm doing right now.
How long do you think it's going to go, Chris? We've got about 2 hours before it starts to get actually tomorrow here.
My intent was to take it to about 11:30 tonight. I don't intend to go super long. Just because.
How many hours is that from now?
So like 1 hour from now.
Hour?
Oh yeah, perfect. Yep. I could go up to 2 hours, but then it's like 5:30 in the morning and it's like approaching stupid o'clock, you know?
Yeah, no. My intent is to do 3-hour games normally. This one's a little bit shorter just because we're doing character creation and stuff like that.
Perfect.
And this is mostly setup stuff to kind of feel out each other's characters and all that.
For sure. Yep.
After this,
That
it'll
works.
be pretty full tilt into investigation and hunting heretics and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say, I looked over at Skype to do the screen capture, and I got Jerome frozen with his giddy smile as I said hunting heretics.
Yeah. Nothing is sweeter.
Okay. And one more screen capture here, and then I'll add my background later. In fact, I may not green screen since Skype is having such issues. That'll save me a little bit of CPU stuff right now. There. I'll be fancy with my my non-chroma keyed green screen behind me. All right, so yeah, that was our break. For everybody who's in chat, because I see there's quite a few people. Thanks, guys, for coming out. This one's going to be kind of a light episode. I mentioned it while we were chit-chatting here in the break, and I've been unmuted, I just found out, so you're all aware. We're going to go for like another hour, and we're going to wrap it up, but the full game is going to start full tilt with the second game. This one is mainly kind of establishing ourselves in the world that we're investigating and the action that's going on in there. So with that said, I've got some names and stuff here. Let me write these down so that I don't lose them. Jeff is Lesos, Cordalis, and Jeff will be back in a moment.
We didn't pray enough in binary, man. That's what we gotta do next time. You gotta apply those sacred oils and unguents.
And Jerome, you are Thrace, Lady Odessa. I see lady is in quotes. That's your nickname. Are
Correct.
you female, or is that like a derogative term that soldiers took with you?
Actually, female.
Okay, cool. I was going to say, it is Women's History Month, and I would like to avoid derogative terming masculine characters like that, but... Let's see if Jeff jumps back in here, and then we'll get started. This is what, if you guys see my screen now, this is what I was talking about. If you guys fall off or change your cameras, it starts to get weird and goofy. Yeah. Hopefully when he comes back, he's in the same spot he was.
Yeah, well, we're getting a nice view of my hair anyway. That's good. Step at the top here.
I love seeing how excited Rob is for Lloyd to be the psyker. Rob's just waiting for you to like explode in demons.
Yep, so am I, to be honest.
That's the best part of playing a psyker.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like playing a time bomb with emotions.
Yep. It's the constant wait and worry. The best.
So while we wait for him to come back, my first Dark Heresy campaign as a player, I played the Feral World Zealot Assassin, but one of our other players played a Psyker. Literally his first roll, he got summon an outside being, rolled on the chart, and got a demon, like a demon. Not one of the cheesy, easy ones to fight. Like, we had to run, and my character happened to be a sniper build, so as we're, like, getting away, the only reason we managed to defeat the thing is because we were, like, hundreds of yards away snipering this demon. And it was just, like, a lot of really good rolls. That was the only reason we survived.
This
cool.
rules
Jeff
in,
back and
even in this.
Spot, so it didn't screw up everything. All right, cool.
This rules in this as well for Powers of the Warp for the Psyker I saw. Like when I try and use the Warp or whatever, if I get doubles, there's bad news, which is excellent. It's my fave.
Yeah, we want to be on the lookout for stuff like that. Where is that written? I'm looking for it right now, just so I can remember where it is.
So it's on the side underneath armor uses and the healing clock or whatever. You can channel your psychic abilities by
cool.
milling warp. This is a regular action rule, blah blah blah. But if all the dice show the same number, I either get suspicion, some harm, or my warp has reduced effect until I get a critical.
Okay, cool. I think that's a little light for psychers, so we may step up that as far as like if it happens, because like having all of your dice show up as the same number is actually pretty unlikely if you have multiple die in your pool. So when it happens, I'm going to add a third dot on there as far as things that I can do, which will be GM's Madness, we'll call it. And I'll just do whatever I want that fits 40k.
Perfect.
All right, cool. So as I stated before the break, we're going to start things off on the shuttle. There's this loud careening sound and shaking and rumbling as your shuttle breaks atmosphere. It's a sound that you've grown accustomed to. This is, and you kind of have to think about it for a moment, your 7th planet that you've been to together? It's been a while now. At least one Imperial year. But the jobs don't get any easier. It's like they ask for more and more from you every single time that you go out. And this time's no different. Your Inquisitor, Andromedes, has sent you to this hive, searching for some sort of drug. Didn't even give you a name for it. That is a psychoactive agent that may be leading to people being able to connect to the warp. You're used to dealing with simple things like EHO sticks and things like that that can mildly deaden or enhance abilities, but nothing to this extreme. Whatever this drug is, it's up to you to find out how they're distributing it and get it off the streets. You know that there's a couple gangs that are in charge of this hive world, Medrion, that you're on your way to. And which gang it is, you're not entirely certain. Andromedas has left a lot of the groundwork for you on this one, which is a nice change because normally he's very hands-on. He's completely in your business. The one thing that he was very strict about is, while you do have an Imperial seal with you, this is not the kind of mission that you can go and throw your seal around. He wants this done as quietly as possible. You know that there is dissent on the hive world Medrion. The people are fighting against the local governor. Basically, the governor has withheld food stores for the upper city of the hive to give them the best cut of things, and it's one of those situations like the French Revolution where things are coming to a head, and more than likely the planetary governor is going to be overthrown. The Inquisition has no stake in this. They don't care what happens to the governor. If you guys decide to interject yourselves, that's your business, but it shouldn't stop you from taking care of the drugs problem. That is pretty much everything that he's willing to give you without you guys rolling for things. This is going to be an information gathering kind of part of the game. You guys can use flashbacks. You guys have contacts, both positive and negative, if you want to interact with them during this flashback scene to establish any sort of information that you can bring with you to the planet. We can definitely do that. Some things that you guys may want to invest yourselves in right away is finding out what the drug's called or who sells it. Those are pretty valuable things that your Inquisitor decided to not give you. You may want to find out some information about the Les Mis situation that you're about to walk into. And you may want to find out about the different gangs that are on this planet. Those are kind of the three really pertinent things. And if you guys want to get creative and think beyond what I've given you, those are kind of like your jumping points. So let's start with Alessos Cordalis. Why don't you explain what Alessos looks like and what our first scene kind of interacting with him is? I imagine if this is like an early 90s made for CW kind of sci-fi version of Warhammer 40k. Like, the cinematics are a little off and a little hokey. You can tell that that's a guy in a box that's supposed to be an alien type thing. Like, that's the budget that this show starts with. Each episode, it's going to get drastically better, though.
Yeah, I imagine Alessos is it's on the smaller side, a little bit shorter, a little bit more wiry, but still strong. It's basically just like completely shaved, just very basic, very nondescript in a lot of ways, as is his specialty in some ways, to be able to blend in and not stand out.
Okay, cool. So what would you like to do to kind of prep for this mission? If you look at your character sheet, there's some gather information questions inside there. You can address any of those questions or the ones that I have mentioned there, and you can tell me what you want to do to achieve that. So this game is very player driven. I'm just going to prompt you guys. I start with Jeff because Jeff played Blades, so he kind of understands where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly who the where he would go for the information, because that's more of a setting thing, but I think the
give me an idea of what you're thinking about and we'll try and fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I think one of the questions there is what do they intend to do? So I think kind of the way that I imagine that he's asking this question is, like, they've been told that this drug has these psychoactive elements, that they tie people into the warp, and he's trying to figure out if that's just a weird side effect or if it's maybe like the result of a specific plan. Like, is that just a bad thing that happens as a result, or are they using this to try to get at something bigger?
Okay, cool. So, who are you going to kind of discuss this? Are you kind of like digging around Imperial headquarters before you guys took the shuttle and kind of like consorting, or are you going to a specific person and trying to sway them?
Would this be something that that my friend Vipria the Zealot might know? Maybe like these connections to the warp and the bad effects, or is that maybe not really tied into this?
Yes, she could know stuff. That's what your die roll results are. Will tell me what she's willing to tell you or knows to tell you. Um, but you know from experience that you're going to get more like religious zealotry than actual facts from her. So that's something that you're going to know right away just about dealing with her. So if you're interested in getting why the Emperor's divine righteousness needs to be here, she's a great person to talk to.
Hmm. Yeah, it doesn't really get me to that question, though. What do they intend to do?
Um, she's a zealot, so I think for the setting, I think it would be actually kind of cool if she had Imperial Tarot, like she knows how to read it, so she could answer that question.
Yeah, I think I would probably go to her then. Just what has the Emperor decreed through your readings that that the plan is here? What should I look out for? Um,
Do you have any idea of how her mannerisms or anything that I should know before I start just playing her?
I mean, I imagine just like typical zealotry of just like super holier than thou, super like high and mighty. I know the truth. Uh,
Okay.
Perhaps more confident than abilities might say. At your discretion.
Okay,
That
cool.
whole kind of thing.
So, you are on one of the gigantic Imperial ships that are basically they're sometimes referred to as like cathedral ships. It's like this colossal space colony battleship cruiser type thing. It's basically a hive city in space is kind of the best way to think about it. You're going through the lower decks where the Imperium has given sanctuary to all sorts of different people. It is not the most savory type individuals that usually end up on one of these vessels, but your friend the Zealot has made it there, and it's kind of like the lower parts of the hive. There's not really buildings here. There's just like canvases that have been strung up on all these ropes that are crisscrossing through what is actually just a sewage collection bay that hasn't filled up with sewage yet. You know that as time goes on, if they don't dock and get rid of their waste, this eventually will have to go away so that sewage could be stored in this tank. So there's this smell that just like clings to the walls and will never go away of human filth. You move away this kind of drab green cloth and you get wafted by the smell of 1,000 different incense, and this blind woman is sitting there with this stack of metal tarot cards, and she's been folding them over, and she sets down a divine tarot. Lessos. I knew you would come. Please, sit. And she kind of runs her hand across the cards, and you can feel her feeling towards the edges. And she's kind of getting a place for it. You know that as a blind woman, she's very particular about where she places things. But the cards are a little off. There's a little bit of an exchange where you move one of the cards into the correct position for her, and she starts flipping the cards over. What I would like you to do is you can choose how you want to socially interact with her, but command, sort, and sway are kind of the obvious choices here as far as what actions, and which one you roll kind of flavors how this conversation goes.
Yeah. I imagine that it's. I think it would be sway, actually. And the way that I think that that would happen is that I think he probably asks her to do this a lot, probably more than she typically wants to. So it's kind of like a pleading thing, like, I'm sorry, I know I keep asking you to do this, but it's very important that I know what we're going into. Like visions that you see, the readings that you give. I think they'd be very useful, and I can make sure to repay you in faith and in service, that kind of thing.
She hears your pleas, and just as it's rehearsed for you, her responses are also rehearsed. It's like this dance that continually goes on between the two of you. She nods a lot, and she mentions towards the end, Alessos, you've been a fine child in the eyes of the Emperor. It is his will that you continue to do his work. He is bound, and unfortunately his children are wandering away from his teachings. When we are done, I recommend that you go see the confessor. I have a feeling that there'll be several sins committed on this planet that you are heading towards. And she starts flipping the cards over. Go ahead and give me your roll. I think this is a controlled situation. There's really nothing at risk here. People see you go in and out of the bowels of the ship all the time, so nobody suspects you of doing anything like crazy or heretical or dissent right now. So I think controlled is probably the easiest thing.
If we want to get it a little bit into mechanics things, how would you feel about a devil's bargain?
Sure. So as a devil's bargain, okay, I've got an idea. So for the devil's bargain, she's going to make you promise something. She believes that as she's flipping the cards over, the first thing that she gets is the Emperor's right hand, or excuse me, the Emperor's left hand, which represents secrets and sorcery, that sorts of things, as far as the tarot is concerned. And she pauses momentarily and runs her fingers across the Imperial Braille that's on this card, and she stops for a moment and she says, you will discover something that bears a large amount of truth to the Imperium. Destroy it. Don't let anyone learn of this secret.
As the Emperor commands through your words, it shall be done.
Okay.
Knowledge will not escape.
So, to give you an idea, a background as far as what's going on, Devil's Bargain, basically, I'm making him enter more or less a gentleman's agreement right now, because normally a Devil's Bargain, I can do mechanical things, but basically, there will come a point where Jeff's character will either know for sure that there is a secret that could destroy the Empire, and he has to destroy it, or he'll just assume that he's destroying the correct thing. But he's going to be on the lookout for some sort of secret to destroy.
Yep, and I have rolled, I use that to get an extra dice,
Okay.
which I have rolled the two of them that gives me, and they were both 5, so 5 is my result.
Okay, excellent. So on a 5 in a controlled situation, it's you hesitate, withdraw, and try a different approach, or else you do it with a minor consequence. Minor complication occurs, you have reduced effect, suffer lesser harm, or end up in a risky position. So you see that she starts flipping the cards, and this happens every time that the tarot is read. There's like a moment of panic because you know that people aren't supposed to get their tarot read constantly. Like that's for the Emperor to know. It's not for common man to delve into his own future as much as you do. Do you hesitate and back off, or do you let her finish? That's the first question I have for you.
Yeah, I think at this point he's kind of fully in to this situation. Like he's done it enough that like the initial guilt that you feel for kind of going around that particular thing, at this point he's probably done it so many times that it's not gone, because you always feel it to some extent, but it's not going to stop him. So he'll accept the consequence to continue on.
Okay. So for the minor complication, what I'm going to do is raise your suspicion by 1. I think what's going to end up happening is you're going to get your reading and the question will be answered for you, which is, which was the question that you were asking about? What is their intent here, right?
What do they intend to do? Yeah.
Yeah, what do they intend to do? Who is the they that you speak of? Do you mean the Imperium or the gang?
The dealers of the drug.
Okay. So the ganger group, you're not able to identify who it is, but she's able to kind of gather from the information that the intent behind it, what they want to do, is kind of shrouded in chaos. They seem to be wanting to open up the warp on this planet for some reason. The chaos powers that are here are protecting that secret from even the Imperial's tarot right now. So 2 complications. 1, I don't give you a very good answer, and 2, I'm going to raise your suspicion. But it is enough of an answer that you know that it has to do with the powers of chaos.
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So how about next we go to Thrace?
Okay. One quick question. So, do we know the planet Medrion? You said there's a Les Mis situation going on. Is the PDF involved, or has the Imperial Guard been called in?
It's still Planetary Defense Force at this point. The guard itself that is assigned to this section of space is actually kind of on the edge of the sector. They are dealing with greenskins at the moment. So pulling the guard back is just not an answer that is possible at the moment, which is part of the reason that the situation's as out of control as it is.
Gotcha. Okay. I want to look into who is the most dangerous on the planet.
Okay.
Aiming particularly for the gangs.
Okay, good. How would you like to acquire this information?
Well, neither my contact really isn't going to apply here. So probably skulking around through some of the rougher sectors of the ship, looking particularly for the people that aren't supposed to be there. Any that might know or have been on Medrion somewhat recently.
Okay. So I think this is a really good tie-in between Alessos and Thrace. Where the suspicion point comes from, Thrace, you're in the same kind of shitty part of the ship, and you see Alessos leaving a tent that you know has this woman that, for whatever reason, the Inquisition has allowed her zealotry to continue. You've seen him come down here a few times in the past, but this is the first time that you've positively connected him with this woman that's a lot of people believe to be a witch down here. She reads the Imperial Tarot, so.
Okay.
So that explains where that one point of suspicion came from. As far as finding somebody, it's probably going to be a survey unless you've got somebody in mind, is the action that you're going to take to get some information. And you can make somebody up and say, this is who I have in mind. I don't really care about that. That's okay.
So you said that on Medrion they're keeping the good supplies for themselves and kind of giving the scraps to the lower levels, right? All right, let's say that there is a trader who deals particularly in high-end alcohol that has contacts there, and also this would feed into my knowing about it because of my predilections.
Okay.
So I will go and see him.
All right. So the dealer that you go to see is, let's say, he goes by the name Alexandros. Alexandros is from more of like he's from the Milky Way. You're not entirely certain. He claims he's from Terra, but given his mannerisms, you suspect that he was probably from Mars and may have possibly been part of the machine cult at some point. He does certain things that are a little bit off, like his movements are a little bit too precise with one of his arms. Like there's not a whole lot of like human movement to his left arm. But he's been selling Amasec for years. He's a straight up and up dealer of fine alcohols and things like that. You know that in particular right now he does have a fine batch of Amasec that comes from another sector of space that he's trying to offload in the planet that you guys are going to, Meridian. But he's kind of had not a great run in this sector just because of the war with the Greenskins. Not a lot of people are willing to part with their money, and he's kind of griped about it and shared drink with you in the past. So there is a little bit of a relationship that you have with Alexandros built up. So he sees you coming and Lady Thrace, and he pulls out a bottle and uncorks it and pours you like 2 fingers, but you know that it's like really like one is the best way to describe what he actually pours. Like he likes you, but not enough to give you too much free drink. What can I do for you?
I need information. Something about Medrion. I understand you're trying to offload some stock there?
Yeah, and anywhere else in this sector that will take me. But yeah, Medrion's my last hope. If not, I guess you and me get to finish this bottle.
That is tempting. I understand things have gotten a little hot there.
Yeah, well, the war is doing Medrion no favors. With the Greenskins' activities recently, the Guard have been busy at the end of the sector, but Medrion, the upper hive is taking all the good food, and the lower hive has been suffering. But to top it off, there's more going on, and he kind of like leans around and looks both directions before he really gets on to saying much more. This is where your role will come in, so go ahead and do a sway, because basically this is you instilling confidence in him to give you all of his information.
Okay. And since I don't have a skill, it's just a single die, correct?
If you have 0 in it, you roll 2 and take the lower number.
Lower, right.
However, you can do a devil's bargain, or if Lloyd wants to, he could help you since he hasn't done anything, but that's going to take up his bit of flashback to prep. So, those are options.
That's fine with me. I don't mind going along, and like maybe I'm standing there, and this is like why you tend to bring me on these, because I can read auras and I can read feelings. I'll be standing there, and like as I see him like check, I'll just whisper to you quickly, like what his emotional state is, and it's something that I do as a whisper, but I let him hear me do it.
Yeah,
so it's like clear to him that I'm reading him.
Yeah, and we won't do a warp roll for this. I think this is a very surface level thing of telepathy. So you get the feeling that his emotional state is something like unreasonably cautious. Like he knows that he shouldn't be this cautious, but he also knows that if he gets caught by the wrong people discussing this information, it could be bad for him. He's kind of like in this like weird state where if the conversation goes good, he'll risk it. but it's got to go good. So now with that bump, you effectively have 1 dice inside the pool.
Okay. 1.
Okay. So I forgot to mention what the situation was here. It was a controlled situation, so you don't have anything to lose really.
Yeah.
But you're gonna falter. You could press on by seizing a risky opportunity, or withdraw and try a different approach. So let's talk about what that looks like in game. So if you press on, as the game goes on, I'm going to stop describing things and we're just going to do results, but I want everybody to feel comfortable with the rules before I continue too far. If you want to press on, he will give you the information, but I will tell you that the wrong people are going to get back to, or get that you are asking questions, and they're going to be better prepared for you when you get planet side. That would be kind of pushing it too far to get your information. If you withdraw and try a different approach, you could try to then speak with someone else, or use the ship's computers to investigate a little bit more as far as like the official reports of what's going on in Medrion, that sort of thing.
I like danger,
Okay.
so let's go for risk.
Okay, cool. I don't think it's going to do anything to you. Like I said, I think it's going to change the situation when you guys arrive planet side, as far as like the gang is being prepared for you. He kind of looks around and he becomes more nervous with the psyker there. And Ezekai, you know that he is just talking because in his mind, if he doesn't say it, you're going to say it anyways. Like if he thinks about it, you're going to reveal it. That's all he's thinking in his brain. And he seems to have experience with psychers, because he does this thing where his brain and his mouth sync up and there's no gap between them. Like he makes sure that everything he thinks he says, and he's just very to the point with very minimalistic details. But he goes, yeah, there's a couple of gangs down there that you have to watch out for. The first one, which I think is the most dangerous, they're known as the Crimson Skulls. The Crimson Skulls started as kind of this cheap biker gang. They scrap together parts from the lower end of the hive. They'd go out inside the dunes and they'd race. And for a while, they were very small time people that didn't matter. It wasn't until a new member came forward and became their leader. This lady is Jenna. Jenna has turned them around, made them more militant. Their vehicles have weapons now. They patrol the streets, and they say that they're protecting the lower class, but from everybody I've talked to on Medrion, they're only making things worse. As far as the upper hives, they're kind of like their own gang, just like they are on any hive planet. They've got access to all the best foods, the best drink, the best air. And he gets nervous, and this is where he kind of stops, and Ezekai, you can feel him hesitate, and this is where his brain and mouth break the connection for a moment, and he thinks they're killing them. And then there's this moment where he's like, I don't know why I'm holding back, and he just goes, the upper hive is cutting off air to sections of the lower hive. People in Medrion don't know about it, but the generators are faulty. They're falling apart. All the metals that the planet could spare have been sent off to the war, melted down to make las pistols and rifles, but they've neglected their repairs. The machine spirits are not happy, to say the least. And as he says that, his arm kind of twitches, and he catches it with the other hand and puts it down. And you can tell that there's a little bit of shame there, Ezekai. If they don't fix it, that's what's going to cause the rebellion. People can figure out their own food and water down in the hives. That's no different than it's always been, but once the upper hives start cutting off fresh air and all you get is pollution, No one's going to live letting someone poison them slowly. And he pours you the half finger that he shorted you before and holds out the bottle to Ezekiel. I don't know that this stuff's going to even sell. Someone might as well enjoy it.
I raise the glass, salute, and drain.
Ezekiel would like look at the bottle somewhat strangely. His like head would loll to one side as he like looks at it, and he like follows the bottle's history of the sand, where it came from, of the how it turned into glass. All this stuff flashes before him, and he just shakily puts it back down onto the counter and says, "I don't partake, thank you."
I'll reach over and grab the bottle then. I'll see that your bottles get sold.
The Inquisition's money, or the Inquisition's credits, are as good as any. Would be glad to continue to do business. Thank you, Lady Thrice. And he turns around, and there's a couple of people that have come up to his stall that he's working out of. You know that they're looking to buy like cheap wines and things like that, just like the common drinks, the stuff that he's wanting to sell to like you in this world, like their nobles. That's his bread and butter. That's really where he makes his money. So he'll do business here, but ultimately you're a more important client. So he doesn't like immediately break off the conversation, but he's waiting for you to excuse him from the conversation at this point so that he can maintain his business.
Okay. I tap Ezekiel on the shoulder and jerk my head. Let's go.
And Alexandros nods and he says, "A pleasure as always. Thank you for coming." And he plays it off like you're no one important as you walk away, hoping to kind of keep things to a minimum. Ezekiel, since you can surface or read surface thoughts of people around you, and it's not something that you have like 100% control over, you get the idea that the two that came up, they seem to exchange kind of like this knowing glance with each other. I'm going to leave it there. I want to foreshadow. I don't want you to like pull out a pistol and shoot these guys right now.
Yep.
But that's basically like setting up the situation that things are going to be risky when you guys get on the planet. So, in the shuttle, you guys can discuss anything that you learned with each other. Would be a good time, but basically it flashes back to the shuttle with the three of you inside there, and there's this light that is on the roof of the shuttle pod. It's flashing red, and it's completely dark inside the pod when the light's off, and when the light lights up, it's like emergency lighting. So it's barely enough for you to see each other when it comes on. But after a few moments of breaking through the atmosphere, the rumbling kind of comes to kind of a steady movement, and it sounds more like the inside of like a commercial airline. You guys can talk to each other and things like that. The turbulence has gone down quite minimally, and you hear the synthetic voice of the machine spirit that controls the shuttle, its pilot, come across, and there's this crackle. 10 minutes until 10 minutes until landing. Please prepare yourselves. Munitions are stored in the back. And then the crackle happens again across the Vox, and the pilot has shut down and gone back to basically communicating solely with the machine spirit instead of you guys. You know that pilots like this, much like navigators, are basically merged with their ship. This is a person that has gone beyond being a person anymore. They're a servitor is what the setting would refer to them as.
So Alessos is going to speak up. I did some research. He lies. The gangs who are distributing this drug, I wasn't able to find out exactly what for, but they seem to be trying to tap into the chaos to try to build up this warp this effect into a frenzy of some sort. That's all I know. But it seems pretty serious.
Hezekiah would touch a purity seal that he has on the outside of his coat. It's like this sacred scroll kind of that hangs pressed there by a wax seal. He would just touch that and close his eyes and mutter a prayer to the Emperor at a mention of chaos and of the warp, of the bad things that dwell there. We learned of a gang, the Crimson Skulls, led by a Jenna. Interesting nomenclature, these savages. Nonetheless, they seem to be on the rise, which would lead me to suspect that they have been gaining a lot from this new illicit substance.
That would provide quite a... Go ahead.
It's a good place to start. And if nothing else, we can find out more about the others.
Yes, if this is selling as well to cause an issue as it sounds, then it would provide a pretty decent income. A gang on the rise, gaining funds through illegal businesses, influence lines.
But we don't know who's buying. Money will be in the upper hive. If this is expensive, that would be where we look.
There is another issue, although not as relevant to our needs. It seems that the upper hive are causing problems for those below with airflow and pollutants and things of that nature. I mean, that is the lot of those who dwell beneath, but it's still something to consider as we make our way here.
Their fate is not ours.
Yet still such things will raise tensions, will make communicating with people down below that much more difficult. We have to reach them. Especially if they see any kind of looks over towards Thrace. They recognize you as the highborn that you are. They will perhaps be less than eager to provide information or assistance.
You raise a valid point. If that's the case, then I suppose we might have to intervene.
Or at the least, tread carefully. We're here for a job. We're not here to solve political disputes of worlds. We're here to get rid of these drugs.
I'd rather deal with this quickly and quietly.
Agreed. It's frightening to me that they would seek this illicit substance that would bring them closer to the warp. It's a danger much worse than any sort of narcotic. The warp is not for those who are uninitiated. It is a fell place, and we must be sure that none of them gain access to it.
Afraid they'll be more like you.
I have undergone decades of conditioning. He would say, although you would see a twitch as he mentions it.
At the very least, any person with access to any amount of meaningful dose of this thing we should consider as a danger and a direct threat to the Emperor. If it comes to it, we'll take them out one way or another.
On many worlds, even knowledge of the warp and that people like myself exist is a crime worthy of death. Knowledge of the world beyond and of the roiling chaos of the warp, it's not for those who dwell below, those who toil for the Emperor. We should treat it as a very, very serious sin.
So how much of a sinner does that make you, Ezekiah?
And as that question hangs, the ship rumbles, and you can feel the landing pad, their gears extend from the shuttle. There's this loud hiss as the vacuum of your shuttle, which is slightly more pressurized than the atmosphere of the hive, all your air ejects from the pod itself. There's a moment where you catch yourselves unconsciously breathing in as the air is kind of sucked out from the pod. And there's this kind of orangey, thick air on the other side that begins to go into what was once a clean sanitary pod that you guys traveled down in. This is Meridian. At its mid-levels where you've landed, it is kind of like being in Los Angeles on a bad day where you can see the smog. At its lower levels, it gets much worse. And at the upper levels, that's where you get fresh air that theoretically should be pumped to the lower levels, but you guys know that it's being shut down. There is a local Arbitos that greets you, which, let me pull up a 40k war name generator. Where's like a guardsman generator, because these are like Space Marine names. Here we go. The local Arbitos is Idaeus. You were briefed that Idaeus would be meeting you. He is a Sergeant First Class of the Planetary Defense Force. He has been with the Planetary Defense Force for 12 years because you guys have a dossier on him. He has been put in charge of the Ganger unit, basically, that handles a lot of the lower levels and their crimes and, involving the Gangers. You do know, because you have access to like internal affairs type records, that at one point he suffered a very hard addiction to EHO sticks that he has not quite kicked, because you observe that he is smoking one as you come up. For Jeff, an EHO stick is a mild hallucinogenic cigarette type thing. It numbs you and makes you feel like the Warhammer 40k universe isn't as bad as it is. But yeah, he's at the end of the landing pad that you have landed on, smoking this EHO stick, and he's got his back towards you, looking out towards the hive itself. You know that now that you've kind of looked over everything, Meridian is the hive name. The planet itself is mostly a desert and inhospitable outside of Meridian, which is the hive and the planet as far as the Imperium is concerned. There is an oasis city that is further out in the desert, but it's one of those things that if you don't live there, there's not really a good reason to go out there, kind of thing. This would be the point where we would discuss load. You guys are unloading off of the ship. How load works is we pick out what your load is, light, normal, or heavy. And I just realized that we did not build your Acolyte crew. Good job, us. I thought character creation went pretty quick. Let's do that real quick. So we already decided that your ability was going to be Inquisitorial Agents. You get 2 upgrades. The ones you start with are Cell and Resolve. Let's take a look at what Cell says it is. Special items, war, suspicion, entanglements. Actually, it doesn't say what the Cell upgrade is. I'm trying to figure out what the equivalent would be for 40 for the regular gangs. I think cell means that you have like support staff, like there's an information cell, like you guys have spies and things like that. That probably is what they're getting at. So you have 2 upgrades that you can spend. The one that is important for load is Acolyte's rigging. Basically gives you 2 free load of weapons and armor and comm beads, which how load becomes important is load is basically how obvious you are on the planet as far as like being here to do shit and make things blow up. Like if you go out there with a load of heavy, you probably have stuff on you like really heavy armor and big ass badass weapons, and people know you're with the Imperium at that point. Your orders were to stay as under the radar as possible, so a normal load would be a little suspicious. A light load, you would just look like a normal person, because most people do carry weapons with them in a hive city.
Yeah, so then the rigging seems like a really good call.
Yeah, it would allow you to hold more without being as suspicious, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
do we get another one?
You do get 2.
Okay. But we don't. I mean, so we have these adepts, combatants, infiltrators, preachers. We don't have those at the moment, though, do we? We don't have a crew of.
No. That would be a type of cohort that you have to build.
Yeah.
But if you take elite adepts, when you build your adepts, they're always elite adepts.
I gotcha.
That sort of thing. I would suggest instead going with something that's a little bit more beneficial right away.
Yeah.
Which would be something like training, or maybe an upgrade on your base. Because your base is going to be determined like what kind of facility you've been given on this planet from the Inquisition. Because we know that the ship that you're a part of is basically an inquisitorial field office. It's huge. You have access to everything up there, but here you're kind of on your own.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that you could do is quality items. Quality items basically will give you an edge whenever you're fighting somebody. If you have a quality weapon and they don't, your weapon is treated as better than theirs is. Like it's forged better, it's much more efficient, it cuts better, it bolts better, whatever the case is.
And what do the trainings do, like insight training or prowess training?
When we have downtime, you can train for those activities, essentially.
Okay.
Normally, and training will get you 1 experience point. Or sorry, the downtime activity of training something, like insight, will give you 1. If you take insight training as an upgrade, instead, when you train it, you get 2 experience points for it. So it allows you to level up those actions faster.
Right.
You can also take personal, which is about your playbook, in case everybody is interested in getting more special abilities faster. During any downtime, you can train each one of those things once: insight, prowess, resolve, and personal.
So I don't know. I think like thematically, quality gear makes sense. Quality weapons for the Inquisition, because we would have superior gear to most people that we would encounter, I think. But also the training works. Like it makes sense because we have also access to like Imperial training, whatever, you know, all the stuff you need to actually like train your skills professionally, I guess.
Yeah.
I will say documents is kind of cool because it comes up inside the Inquisition books a lot, especially like the Ravener's books. But basically, you guys have a bunch of documents that are kind of borderline false documents. Having quality ones means that you can pass off your fake documents as more legitimate than they are.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that feels very inquisitorial as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are we going to go in heavy a lot of places, or are we going to be nice?
Yeah, that's the question. I mean, I guess the goal is to go in light and quiet, although how often we stick to that goal is a different question. But
Mm-hmm.
but I think the idea generally is to like be as quiet and unnoticed as possible. And worst comes to the worst, I can just like rip that memory from somebody's brain, although I don't want to do it often in case I explode.
Yeah, that's a hard choice for me.
So, I will say that the base upgrades are really good to invest in. Like secure and hidden are like super handy to invest in, no matter what. Because if your base is not hidden, and I have somebody who's mad at you, they know where your base is and they'll go attack it when you're not there. If it's secure, it'll be defensive, but they'll know where the location is. If it's hidden, hidden's kind of better because they have to work to discover the location before they can attack it.
What does the servitors upgrade do for us?
So it doesn't really say, so I'm going to get a little creative with it. I think servitors is basically going to be stuff like that will cover like the shuttle that brought you here. You guys will have like servitors that drive like vehicles within the city limits for you guys. It will upgrade their abilities. So like upgrading the servitors will get you a lot of like miscellaneous bumps and bonuses kind of thing. Like if you have a skull servitor that follows you around that you say that you picked up somewhere, that thing is better at recording things. It doesn't get patchy missing data corruptions and stuff like that. Which I think it would be fine if one of you took a skull servitor if it's not on your list, because that servo skull is on the list for adept. Cool.
I can have a cherub, which is like this creepy little thing that follows me around and shouts about the Emperor.
And it looks like a little cherub.
Yeah, so gross, so terrifying.
I mean, if like a cherub baby had its skin stretched completely across its skeleton and had like no muscle underneath, yeah, that's basically what they look like.
So terrible. I think either the good documents, the good weapons, or hidden base would be my three.
Yeah, I think hidden base is kind of where I was leaning. Like, it's just so... Secrecy is just such a valuable thing to have. And, like, I know at least for me, I already have, like, things built into my playbook that let me have nice weapons as part of my items. So it's like that's not hugely important for me.
Most every playbook will come with, like, a fine weapon or something like that. That is already superior to, like, your run-of-the-mill thugs. So... if you take quality on top of that, that's like having a fine plus weapon, effectively, at that point.
Yeah, let's go for hidden base, I think. Like, it's hidden base or documents for me.
Okay. Idaeus puts out his Eho stick, and he sees you, and he starts to go to salute, but then he realizes that none of you are wearing... like the inquisitorial badge of office on you at the moment, and he kind of catches himself as his hand gets to about his waist. Lady Odysseia, you know, because you were a soldier, that a bad move like that could get you snipered. Do you react very well to this?
I do not, in fact.
Okay.
It's Sergeant Idaeus.
All right.
Yeah, is his rank sergeant?
Yes, Sergeant Idaeus.
So at this point, we've approached him rather.
Yeah, he like brought it up to his waist, and you could see that he tried to cover it by extending his hand like he's gonna shake your hand, like you're an old friend, but like his hand tilted a little bit, like he was going for the salute.
I grab his hand and squeeze hard. Sergeant Idaeus, it's so good to see you, my old friend.
Yes, good to see you again, Lady Odessa. Your cousin sent me. He'd like me to take you to your and he kind of struggles with it because you're squeezing really hard. To the house that you'll be staying at. He looks forward to visiting with you, but today his business keeps him occupied, what with the Senate being in the state that it is right now. And you know that he's talking in Imperial code right now, Basically, what he's telling you is that he is here to escort you to the hideout, and that the city is at a higher alert because of some recent activity that is dissonant to the planetary governor.
That would be fine. It's been a long flight. Now, I assume you have transportation for us?
I'm afraid it's not as nice as you're used to, but yes. And he kind of waves his hand over to, let's see, a Honda Odyssey type van is probably the best explanation of what this is. If it was like real beat up and made out of like big sheets of iron that have been bolted together, and it's got like tank treads on it. It's a pretty weird looking minivan thing going on. And he brings over like your carry-on bag, like your bags that are staged to look like clothing and things like that, like duffel bags, and he loads them up with your gear and stuff like that. But did you guys decide what load each of you will be taking? This is something I need to know as the GM. You don't have to decide what those items are, but you do have to decide if you want a light, medium, or heavy load.
I'm going light.
Me too.
Yep, I was going to go normal initially, but with the rigging, that settles that, and I do not need that, so I will go light as well.
Okay, cool. You know that basically the weapons and things that like that you left behind on the shuttle's going to take a lot of that stuff away, so you're going to be stuck with light for a while unless you guys do things to acquire some assets and things like that. There will be some provisions inside your storehouse, but it's going to be a pretty bare bones storehouse. This is kind of like a CIA bunker that hasn't been used in a long time that you're going to. About like a 2-hour ride inside this rumbly minivan gets you deeper and deeper into the hive, and you end up taking these kind of like vehicle-sized service elevators up to the higher levels, and you end up in, if you were to break the hive down into 5 sections and into like fifths, you're on the 3rd tier. You're just above the pollution layer, so you're getting fresh air, but it's like the bottom of upper society as far as the hive is concerned. This would be like Los Angeles on a good day. And he pulls up to this. It's a small estate. It looks nice. It has some flag markings of the let's see here. Of House Letcher or Letcher. Let's go with something easier for me to say because I'll screw that up every time. House Birdsong. That's with a Y because it's fancy in 40K. There you go. The flags and markings, being a noble, you know that the House Birdsong is a house that is primarily known for their presence on this planet. They don't really have a big stretch of power or anything outside of Meridia. It's mainly within the local government that they really control things. And as you begin settling down, you realize that the bunker itself is actually hidden away through a series of passages that are accessed through this building to get you to an area that is kind of in between the layers of the hive city. So you're in the lower hive, but you're at kind of like an underground area for the upper hive section. So it's hidden away and pretty secure after you look at the different like security measures and junctions through tunnel systems that you had to go through to get to this place. Once you get there, the Sergeant Audacious, there we go, brings in your bags and settles them down. Well, This will be your headquarters to work from. Office, really. There's no place to stay. You can stay inside the estate house, but as far as your supplies, this will probably be the best place to keep them. Do you have any questions or anything that I can help with before I return to my duties?
Sergeant.
Go ahead.
Sergeant, have you forgotten how to salute? Give the sign of the Aquila.
No, I made an error. And he looks to Thrace when he says that.
He's acting within protocol. Well, poorly, but he's still acting within protocol.
You'll have to forgive me. I'm a sergeant of the Planetary Defense Force. I've never been in a war zone. I familiarized myself with the protocols that were necessary for the Inquisition, but I'm glad that it didn't go poorly on the landing pad this afternoon.
To give the sign of the Emperor, the eagle, his greatest symbol, should be the duty of every citizen in every greeting.
Of course, and he brings up his hands and he bows his head.
Don't forget again.
He kind of nods and he looks to Thrace a little confused because basically his brief said do not salute, do not show the Aquila or anything like that, and he's just like, okay, I don't know what to do here.
Keep the freak pacified, but make sure that you preserve our identity.
It is not merely for appearances that we give the sign of the Aquila. If we think about why we do such things, it is so that the Emperor may bless us with his protection and his love. It is not simply for protocol.
The Emperor protects, but a flak jacket protects better. If you want to paint a target on our backs, go right ahead, but I would advise strongly against it. We're supposed to be circumspect here.
The sergeant says, of course, and what throws you off is he doesn't leave. He walks in and takes a seat behind a desk, breaks out a data pad and starts working on paperwork.
Sergeant, are you our attaché for this?
The Lord Governor has requested that I make my presence as minimized as possible. I am at your disposal for anything that you require, but he believes that it would be best to let people believe that I am taking a vacation.
And what's
your to sit in this same room and watch her every moves?
If you request, I can leave. I simply sat down to do work, but my data pad can go anywhere. And he gets up with his little data pad and he begins to walk out. You guys are well off enough to know that if he has a data pad, he's connected to the network that's within this building. So fair warning before he walks off with that.
Sergeant.
Yes, ma'am.
Come back inside. I need to ask you about House Birdsong.
Of course. And he'll walk back in and he'll set down the pad. What can I help with?
Are you any relation to the house, or did the governor put you here for a particular reason? Perhaps because he is.
I am of a minor connection to House Birdsong. I do have access to the manor house, and this is where my family raised me. And he seems kind of like hesitant to admit it. Since becoming part of the Planetary Defense Force, however, I don't tend to my family as much as I used to.
I know that well.
It should not appear suspicious that you or even I are on the grounds, if that is your question. You've all been given identifications that mark you as a part of House Birdsong. And there's data pads on desks that have your names on them. Like there's just like those cheap little metal name tags on the desk that have like just your last name listed on there. If you go to check them, you'll find out that your false identifications that you've been issued by the Lord Governor, which you know he can track very easily since he's the one that created them. For Thrace, you are a distant cousin from another planet inside the system. You are Jasmine Birdsong. For Ezekiel, you have been marked as a manservant who is loyal to your term of service is 10 years. You've served out 2, and that you are a specialist in calculations and accounting for the house. Your name is Claudius. And for Jeff, you are a protectorate, of the house. So you have been given this very elaborate backstory that you rose up out of the hive, that your name is a cod, that you have a tenure with the Planetary Defense Force of 8 years before you became a protectorate of the house. And since becoming a protectorate of the house, you have risen in station, and you are here as a personal guard to the lady.
Excellent servants.
You know as well as anybody else that this is the easiest way to get them in places that you are, without question.
Excellent. I will not abuse this power at all.
Okay. The Birdsong family is made their money by selling minerals that are out inside the deserts. Particularly like copper is the main thing that they get. This planet produces a fine copper powder that, if melted down, it can produce a large amounts of copper. It's actually inside the sands. They have a lot of mineral rights out in the deserts, so that gives you an idea of what the family is about. And Adeus will go through all that stuff to familiarize yourself with it. You're picking up that Adeus has a slight accent that kind of like how I'm talking right now, where I keep taking pauses. That's kind of the accent of the people of this planet. They hesitate and pause and move through their conversation. It's not to say that he is not a determined man. He just sounds not as determined as a standard Imperial citizen. And you, from talking with him over an extended period of time, that you're able to determine that that's kind of how the conversations on this planet go.
And did you say that he was like part of the gang investigation unit, or like he was part of? Yeah. Okay.
This is also a time where you guys could do a little bit more staging and setup, and then we'll get to talking about what we want our mission to be, and then we'll wrap up. So you guys have any questions as far as gather information that you want to do with Idaeus before we go?
Definitely want to ask him about the skulls.
Okay. I think you're more of a command situation, because that's pretty much how he's going to respond to you the best at the moment.
Yeah. Sergeant, you are part of the gang unit dealing with some of the criminal elements here?
Yes. I'm part of the Lower Hive Criminal Investigation Unit, yes.
I've heard talk of a group called the Crimson Skulls. I've also heard that there are two other groups, but I haven't been able to put names to them.
He pulls up his data pad, and when you see him unlock it, you can see that he was working on filling out dossiers. And he presses a couple buttons, and there's this projection that goes up of it's like a holoscape essentially. So there's a bunch of lights that come off the pad. It makes like a 3D image, and it's like two-dimensional images that have been holographically projected from this, I should say. And there's a couple different faces, and one of them is marked as Jenna, and it has this skull marking on it. You can see that she's a woman that is of very dark skin. She has this scar on her face that kind of goes along down her nose for the most part to about the middle of the bridge, and then it cuts off wide to the left and down. He'll point out Jenna, and the other two gangs are the Vapor Rats and the Metal Crowfox, which are great 40k terrible monsters. I will type out Crowfox because that's weird. The Vapor Rats are led by Castor Marnet. Marnet used to be a merchant, and the Vapor Rats are people that have lived in the Underhive for years and years, and they became a gang recently, within the last like 6 months. Of note, there was always kind of whispers that there were Vapor Rats, and that most people chalk them up to being kind of like youths in the Underhives that did mostly pickpocketing and things like that. But according to Idaeus's reports, the Vapor Rats have been passing out pamphlets and information about like what the government's actually doing, what the governor intends to do. He mentions that the Vapor Rats have even accused the governor of withholding food and air circulation from the lower levels, which immediately lets you know that he is not aware that it's actually happening. The next one is Metal Crowfox. That is led by a woman named Emmy. Emmy is from the Oasis that I spoke about earlier. She is another darker skinned woman, and she seems to be very attractive, at least inside her picture there. And she has a long list of crimes that include stuff like trafficking drugs, murder. It is believed that she robbed a church. That's one of her crimes on the list there. And another crime that's listed that will catch the psycher's interest is not only robbing a church, but trafficking psychers. Yeah. Those are suspected charges. They are not anything that she's actually been brought to court for, but a lot of times that's enough as far as the Inquisition's concerned.
That is a big crime.
Yeah.
Major crime.
Yes.
The Metal Crowfox have pretty much always been around. They have been a huge problem. The crimes that Emmy is listed for, pretty much the whole gang is listed for. They have a lot of drugs, a lot of violent charges, human trafficking, psycho trafficking, raiding religious sites, things like that. Looking it over, they seem like probably the more likely gang to do the drug dealing than the Crimson Skulls. The Crimson Skulls seem a little bit more dissident, kind of like the Vapor Rats do, from all these police reports. The Crimson Skulls, as I mentioned, most of their charges are stuff like stealing from dumps, like auto parts and things like that. Street racing, that's what most of their crimes are. There's a couple of violent charges inside there, but it's not like they don't even have murder listed on there. It's like aggravated assault with deadly weapon, that sort of thing.
Sergeant, what are the marks that distinguish one of these Kruthoks or Krothoks?
Kruthoks, they bear markings on their left shoulder. All of them will most all of them, at least the active ones, will show their markings. And he pulls up a couple images, and they're definitely like crime scene photos of like dead bodies, but they have these, it's 3 horizontal marks that kind of look a little similar to like military rankings on their left arm. And then he shows you another picture where there's like these carved in tally marks on the back side of their left arm. Another distinguishing factor of the Kruthoks is they like to mark themselves for their crimes. It makes bringing them into court a lot easier, but they are awfully proud of them.
Ezekiel will like mutter to himself quietly about like tribal. Like he's heard about this on like death worlds and feral worlds where like savages would do this kind of thing, and he would like note that to himself, that's like a tribal, a natural sort of tribal behavior.
Well,
Where do
the Metal Kruthoks, tribal is probably the best way to describe them.
Where do the Kruthoks mostly congregate?
Lowest sections of the hive, mostly. Right now, their drug of choice are rebreathers. They've been selling them at exorbitant prices.
Speaking of drugs, have you heard of anything new being sold?
He kind of thinks about it, and he goes through his slate, and he said, well, not necessarily new. There's been a drug that has been around for a while, and he kind of keeps going through, and he goes, here it is. I'm sure you're familiar with Butcher's Nails, the Space Marine. Well, there's a drug that takes its name. It's Butcher's Powder is what they call it. Its effects are very similar, but nobody has been dumb enough to buy the stuff in years until recently. It's been sold a lot more. But it's different than the old batches. People are more insane with this stuff, less bloodthirsty than they used to be. When Butcher's Powder came through the first time, we had murder in the streets. That's where most of the Kruthoks got their marks. But nowadays it's just strange. There's been a lot more prophesizing on the streets. And you can see that he's having a hard time kind of articulating what exactly he's seeing, because he's not exposed enough to be like, that's heresy. Like, he doesn't understand what it is. But you can tell from his descriptions, his emotions, that there are probably zealots in the street talking about heresy in the lower hives.
Mm-hmm.
Any odd stories associated with this powder? Rumors on the streets?
He he flips through and he gets to one report inside his pad. He says, well, there was a guy that we brought in. Let me see if I can find it. This will be your command roll, because this is actually going to be the part that gets you the most information. The rest of the stuff is pretty cursory that you can get just digging through files.
6.
Okay. So this is a controlled situation. A 6 is considered a success. And you get exactly what you wanted out of the deal. I don't play any tricks or anything like that. Yeah, there was this guy that we brought in, and he pages through, and he finally comes across it. Sicarius Hessman. He, well, according to the reports, the officer that arrested him found him in the streets, naked, and screaming that the Emperor is returning. We thought he was drunk or high, and so we brought him in to sleep it off, but he puts on the projection again, and you see these images of, like, profane scripture written in blood all over this cell, and the man has cut open his skin and flayed open his chest. He's dead in the middle of the cell. He said, and Igdaeus kind of stops for a moment. He says, well, I don't really know how to explain this, but I'm sure the picture does better than I could. You can see plain as day, like, chaos symbols scried on the walls in blood. The words themselves, even in the picture, are hard to look at without making your head feel like terrible, especially for the psyker. In fact, if you want to look at it for more than a few seconds, I will need a warp check from you.
I think at the first sign of like one of the symbols of chaos, which he would have been trained to like recognize, he would just immediately look away and like step away even from the
Like,
the area.
Plain as day, like a star of chaos in blood on the wall. Like, as soon as you see that, you're like, nope, I'm walking away from this.
Yeah, and he would urge him to like pull that image away and to like put it away.
Yeah, Igdaeus kind of hesitates for a second, and then he puts the projection away. It's still on the data slate, so you can look at it, but it's no longer being like projected to the room.
When did this happen?
This was about 2 weeks ago. That's when we made contact with the Inquisitor.
And Sicarius was a Kruthok?
No, Sicarius was a miner from out in the deserts. He would collect the sands and filter them. And he goes into this process explaining kind of these gigantic Zamboni-like machines that they have that basically scoop up the sand and filter out the copper dust from the sands in the desert. And that basically, whenever there's a dust storm, it brings up more copper up, and then they send out those harvesters again. But Sicarius was known for his dalliances in the past, and he pulls up Sicarius's criminal report, and he has a lot of like stuff that's drug charges and very like minor things, though he does have a previous case about a year back using the butcher's powder as well. And aggravated assault when he used butcher's powder previously.
If this picture is any indication, then this problem may be more serious than we thought.
Or at the very least, more bloody.
Ignatius kind of nods like, that's why I called you guys. Like, doesn't know what what to do or make of any of this stuff, and he says, I will continue compiling my reports for you. Unfortunately, I was given this task with very little notice of your arrival. Some of the dossiers are still incomplete. If I find anything else of value, I'll bring it to your attention immediately. And he goes to grab his data pad and leave with it again. If you guys want to do or say anything about that.
Leave the data pad, Sergeant. I'd like to do some research.
He speaks up like he's about to say you've been assigned one, but he thinks better of it, and he sets down the data pad. Very well. There's food inside the main house. If you get hungry, you can return there, and a place to stay.
One more thing, if you don't mind.
Yes.
It seems like we may be venturing to the lower levels of the hive. You mentioned rebreathers. If we need them, could you procure us some?
Of course. I have access to the PDF supply. We can acquire them when you need them.
Perfect. Thank you.
You'd also be familiar, Sergeant, with the way that these people dress down in those lower levels, notably some of the gang elements. If you could acquire some clothing that looks appropriate, would be obliged.
He nods his head, and he motions to some foot lockers that are by the desks. I've provided you with some clothing that matches the planetary attire to the aliases that you've been given by the governor, but I'll see what I can do about something a little bit more appropriate for the lower hives.
Thank you.
And with that, he will be heading back to the manor house to go to his duties. With that said, we're at the point where I wanted to call it quits, because that's a 3-hour mark. I like 3 hours with Blades in the Dark. As we start to play, you'll see why I like it. It's a pretty good number for how this game kind of pans out. What we're going to do is start the next game in mission. So what I'd like you guys to do is think about in between what you want to do first, because you've been given a whole plethora of leads, some of which you can see that they may have connections to other things that are going on, and it's kind of up to you how you want to handle this investigation and what things you want to push and pursue. So inside our chat, we'll discuss that some more about what our mission will be, and I'll prep the stuff for it, and I will get with you guys to determine the next day that we'll play. As I mentioned to these guys, for anybody who's watching, this is intended to be about 6 parts, maybe a little faster than that, maybe a little bit longer than that, just kind of depends on how everything goes. I overestimated when I said 6 parts. I think it's probably going to be about 5. We'll see how it goes. With that in mind, thank you everybody for tuning in. If you guys haven't checked out these guys' stuffs, their Twitters are on here, so feel free to hit them up on any of those, or their YouTube channels. I know that me and Lloyd are probably the worst Twitter people ever, so YouTube's a better place to find us.
Yep.
But hopefully that gets better eventually.
Yeah.
And keep your eyes out, because there is going to be some news coming to my channel shortly. So that'll be pretty exciting, and I know that these guys are all working on their own stuff as well. With that said, I do want to point out one thing. If you are like me and you like Grizzly, Viking, Death, and Awesomeness, check out Lloyd's Isklov setting. He's doing some work on it and doing some beta testing. So if you are interested in doing any beta testing and spending some time in the Grizzly North frozen tundra of being a Viking badass, he's the guy to reach out to. And then if you are interested in any sort of apothecaryism or hunting around and using monsters for nefarious things, Jeff's your man to talk to about that. He's working on a what genre did you say it was?
The setting, it's like I don't have like a super short way to like describe it, which is probably a bad thing. It's like, imagine like not like apocalyptic, but like Gothic era Europe, but with like a lot of alchemy and occult weirdness, kind of thing. A lot of like strange rituals and weirdness.
Very cool. And Jerome, do you have anything going on that people might be able to catch you on as well?
Nope, unfortunately, I'm
Not
the new
yet.
I'm the new guy here, so I'm just I'm catching up.
No, it's fine. So if you are looking for a player, Jerome's an excellent player getting into this one, so feel free to add him to your interest posts and things like that. With that said, everybody who's tuned in, thank you very much. This is really exciting to see the turnout and things like that as the game gets going on. It's going to get deeper and more investigative and hopefully more chaos involved. And my goal is to have a warp storm over this city by the end of it, caused by Lloyd's character. That's what my goal is.
All I want.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you at the gaming table.